The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode number 36.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. Today we're discussing Saints of Imperfection. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And when I say we're discussing the Saints of Imperfection, it is the latest episode from Star Trek Discovery. And guys, I wanted to bring up a question we had from a listener who wanted to know why we weren't, going back and forth, talking about other Star Trek series.
Because we can at any time step through the Guardian of Eternity and revisit old Star Trek.
Right, exactly. Which is what we do, in between seasons, what we were doing before the season of Star Trek Discovery came up. And it's particularly poignant because not everyone can, not everyone has subscribed to CBS All Access and therefore are not watching Star Trek Discovery. And some people refuse to watch Discovery because it's they have a thing against it. But one of the things that came up was why aren't we offering something for them? And the bottom line is we just don't have the time to do multiple episodes a week.
Right.
All of us are already doing at least 3 podcasts a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
On our spare time.
Right.
And this is the pattern we've kind of set with Secrets of Doctor Who, was that during the seasons we would talk about the current episode, and then the other episodes we started going back to historic episodes as filler between the seasons. And so we're doing that with Star Trek as well.
Yeah.
So we'll be back to talking about classic Trek very soon, just in a few weeks.
Right. It's the season of Star Trek Discovery ends at the end of April, and we're already got stuff in the can for talking about Deep Space Nine after that and more. So we'll be back to that. But our hope is that if you eventually get a chance to watch Star Trek Discovery, streaming like on Netflix or something like that later on, that these will be here for you to come back and listen to when you do get a chance to do that. And with the upcoming Picard series, the Section 31 series, the Lower Decks, there's even a Nickelodeon series which we could talk about at some point that they're coming out with for kids for Star Trek. We probably won't do an episode by episode of that one, but there's lots.
You never know.
Depends. If it's as high quality as the original animated series was, we might.
That's true. But in any case, there's lots of new Star Trek to talk about in addition to the classic stuff. So we want to make sure that we're covering it all. And as as a Star Trek podcast, we just can't ignore a new series, as it comes out. So I hope you understand that, and we don't take it personally if you don't listen to these interim episodes while we're getting something. Jimmy takes it personally. He'll be coming by to your house to talk to you about it. But for the rest of us, listen to it when you can. That's the beauty of podcasts, is it's you listen to what you can.
Yep.
So let's get into today's episode, which is called Saints of Imperfection. Let's first kind of I'll mention a brief recap, which is that we're picking up when we left off in the last episode. Tilly has been taken over by this alien cocoon. They're trying to save her. And meanwhile, Section 31 shows up to help them track down Spock. And so it's sort of the same sort of thing. But the name of the episode is Saints of Imperfection. And like a lot of the series titles, the episode titles this season, there's not an obvious explanation necessarily for what it's about. So what do you think Saints of Imperfection is a reference to?
I'm not entirely sure. In the old days, they would have, like back, by that I mean the original series, they would often title episodes after famous literary things like Shakespeare quotes or just famous sayings from classical literature. For example, there's the episode "Whom Gods Destroy,"
Right.
and that's the one that's set in a madhouse. This is psych ward planet, and they never explain that on screen, but they're counting on the audience to know the classic Greek literature quote, "Those the gods would destroy, they first make mad."
Right.
And that's why it's set on a madhouse planet. But if there's a Saints of Imperfection quote, I don't know what that is.
Well, and I just in thinking of, you could take the idea of a saint as someone who's been perfected. We view the saints as those who have been perfected in heaven, and then it makes it almost a contrast between a saint who's perfected and someone who's imperfect. I mean, that's just kind of off the top of my head, really one of the explanations I can think of.
That's clear. That's clearly what's going on in the title. I just don't know if is it an allusion to something else.
Well, there is a quote from the director Guillermo del Toro, who is famous for a lot of movies that feature monsters like Hellboy and some of these others. And he features lots of monsters. And he says monsters are the patron saints of imperfection. That's why he's so interested in them. And maybe that's what the reference is to, because in this episode, the creatures from the dimension of the mycelial network are seeing someone as a monster,
right? And
that person sees those creatures as the monster, and it's their imperfections of themselves in their perception.
We see them as monsters. They see one of us as a monster. Yeah,
right.
And so I would view this as a Hollywood, if that's the explanation, if it's a Guillermo del Toro thing, I would view that as the dumbing down and narcissism of Hollywood.
Right.
Because they're not making references to classic Greek literature. They're making references to inside Hollywood stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Because you have to kind of know. Although these days, unlike in 1966, we could Google it and find the reference. So maybe that's what they're counting on. But yeah, you're right. It is a bit self-referential for screenwriters to be quoting directors in episode titles,
even if they're trying to suck up to get more work.
Right. If this Star Trek thing doesn't work out, I'm going to Guillermo del Toro.
In terms of applying the title to the episode, now Father's quite right. We have this mix of this irony of saints and imperfection put together. And in the episode, both the humans and the Jasep have fundamentally good motives. So they're like saints in that respect, but they also are none of them perfect. And they're both engaging in destructive things that are harming each other. And so there's imperfection in that respect.
Okay. So let's get into the episode itself. It seems to have become a thing where that every episode starts off with a Burnham voiceover. That's this season's constant through all these episodes. And so she says in this one, words define who we are: officer, orphan, widower, shipmate. And I kind of take exception to that, because words don't define us; they describe us.
Right.
They just what defines us is our actions. In more than words do, right?
I think it's a matter of semantics. How do you define, and describe?
Okay. I guess, yeah. I mean, I suppose from a particular point of view, that's what she's saying, is define as in words describe us. But I think in the popular consciousness, sometimes define is taken to mean the word gives us our identity, as opposed to
makes us who we are.
Right, right. So maybe, yeah, okay, I can see that.
What I really liked about her monologue, there were two lines in the monologue I really liked. One, because she's terrified about what's happening to Tilly and she doesn't know. She says, there is no word for the unique agony of uncertainty. And, in English, there's not. There's no word that specifically calls that emotion out, but we have all felt it if we're adults. Yeah. been moments in our lives where there are huge stakes hanging on something that we don't know the outcome of, and it's uniquely agonizing to be in one of those moments.
Right. That is a very good moment.
Also, I like the line where she says, "I want to have faith," and she's not talking about religious faith here, but again, that's something when you're in one of those moments where there are huge stakes and you don't know the outcome, you really want to be able to just trust that it's all going to work out okay, but you don't know.
But at the end of the episode, she gets a little voiceover again, and she does actually kind of, the way she phrases it sounds like a faith beyond just faith in others. Or she says, "I envy those who believe there's a greater hand writing our story, who chooses the words that keep the chaos at bay." Chaos.
And then she has a prayer wish. She says, if there is a greater hand leading us into an uncertain future, I can only hope it guides us well. So we do have a more religious thing. And at the end, she's envious. She says she's envious of those with faith. And then she adds like connection, joy, love, resurrection.
Yeah.
Right.
And which ties into the themes of the episode.
Which is kind of interesting because, of course, you do have Captain Pike, who very clearly has a faith background and has a faith belief, even if it's kind of what we would consider maybe a kind of a wishy-washy,
or unstated. They haven't really shared it with us.
But there's still some form of a belief structure, which we could presume to be Christianity, because he does actually mention church. He talks about how I think it was his sister only gave a straight answer when she was at church.
Yeah, cousin. But yes. So he's got a Christian background of some kind.
Right. So it's interesting that these topics of faith keep coming up within this episode. I mean, within the series, which given the inclusion of these Red Angels is understandable, but it's just, I think it goes beyond, and it's very interesting. I'm curious where they're going with it. It bears watching.
Well, and there's another big one in this episode, which is what's the deal with Dr. Culber?
Right.
Because eventually, I suspect that this is one of the episodes they did reshoots on, because there are rumors of reshoots that things went too heavy in the opinion of someone or other in the faith direction, and then they toned it down. And that could be part of why this part of this episode is incoherent, because we have they find Dr. Culber in the spore zone and the mycelial network. And so, like, how did he get there? Well, apparently he was transferred through Stamets, who had a connection to the mycelial network. So when he was killed, his soul apparently jumped to the spore dimension, and then they're able to reconstitute a body for him. So he's resurrected in this episode. Okay, fine, interesting science fiction stuff. But the way they talk about it, they never use the word soul.
Right.
And instead, they use the word energy.
Yep.
And so they say his energy was transferred into this other dimension, and now they have to build a body for him out of ordinary matter. And I'm going, dudes, okay, number one, vitalism, the idea that there's a natural energy that makes us alive, is something that science doesn't buy into these days. And all matter is energy, E equals mc squared, remember?
Right.
And so what energy are you talking about if it's not vitalism and it's not normal matter and you're not calling it a soul?
Well, I definitely got kind of the Eastern mysticism type vibes, where I don't have to expect to hear talk of chakras and things like that.
Yeah, it was pretty incoherent. That was in my notes. I was like, what does this even mean? Like, I didn't, like, it was so, as they tried to explain it, they were so much avoiding explicit religious discussion.
Yeah. The actual word soul, they didn't want to actually put the word soul in it.
And
where the original series would have said soul. I mean, that very clearly would have said something like that.
And they might have even had a discussion, if you want to be vague about it, say, well, I don't know what a soul even is. Maybe it's some weird undiscovered thing. Maybe it's just some subtle material phenomenon. You can have your ambiguity and still use the word soul. So what it felt like to me is this is politically correct nonsense at the network level, where they want to talk about religion, but then they can't. And so there's this incoherence on the script level. My sense was originally the script said soul, and then they reshot to get rid of the word soul.
Keep in mind, Star Trek has already gone down this path. They've already done this before in The Search for Spock. His Katra, which was his Vulcan soul.
And and they had their ambiguity there. And then, on Bajor, your Pa is strong, and you got the Pa rays.
Even in this series, the idea of soul, because they took the Katra and how Sarek was connected to Burnham over, light years because of the connection they have.
Right.
A part of him is now with her, or however they put it.
Right. And so there's this incoherence that as a result of their inability to really kind of address it. I mean, it's just either go all in or you don't go there. That's that's really the problem. So let's go back to the beginning, which is when Tilly has disappeared in this cocoon. She has been transported. They figured out that this cocoon is essentially almost like an organic transporter device, which is kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah,
it's an interesting idea, but it sounds very unpleasant to me because first of all, you get just the idea of having your molecules ripped apart by the transporter, which we already believe in Star Trek or already have in Star Trek. But then you come out of it and you're covered in that mycelium goo. That just doesn't sound like a pleasant way to travel.
Yeah, and neither does the transporter look really great. It looks kind of like a giant alien cockroach dog.
I know, it is really creepy looking, and it kind of pulses and such.
Breathes.
Yeah. So while Stamets and Janet Reno and that's just going to be her name now.
That's her name.
That's her name now. Janet Reno. Are they're trying to figure out how to get Tilly back. Meanwhile, on the bridge, they finally track down Spock's shuttle. They have to disable it to bring him aboard.
Finally, closure on this unnecessarily long plot arc.
Or not. Surprise! It's Philip and Giorgio. Oh, surprise! And Burnham reacts to her as the Emperor, while everyone else sees her as Starfleet Captain Giorgio.
Now, I do have a question about that.
Yes.
Did I miss where they explain that she didn't actually die in the Battle of the Binary Stars?
That's exactly the question I had.
I mean, Pike would be a good enough. You could kind of say, okay, he was off in the first 5-year mission of the Enterprise, and maybe hadn't actually heard until he came back.
But Saru was there.
He came back.
Yeah,
she was. The Empress was in our universe, but no one else acts like, no, this person died, and now all of a sudden she's back again.
Both Saru and Detmer were on the Shenzhou when Giorgio was killed.
And her death was one of the inciting incidents of the war. It should have been all over the news.
Right.
But I assume what they did was Section 31 then said, oh, she was really going on a secret mission that was vital to our intelligence efforts in the war, and that's why we let this story out that she had died.
Or she'd been captured by the Klingons or something.
Or had been captured or something, and so they must have done something like that.
We found her drifting in a shuttle pod somewhere for months or whatever. Yeah.
But it's a loose end. It's certainly a narrative loose end that they didn't pick up.
It is interesting, though, that like Pike, who is in command, does not know who he's actually dealing with here. But he does notice the difference between her and the Giorgio he's used to.
Right.
I mean, the fact that he doesn't know that she's actually the emperor of the Terran Empire, that's fine. It's just the idea of all of a sudden this person just comes back from the dead with no explanation of why.
Right.
Yeah, although he's quick. I mean, he's not thinking in terms of, I mean, you're right. It is a loose thread in terms of why she come back from the dead. He believes she's been in retirement, that she retired from Starfleet.
Right.
And he deduces from the circumstances in which he finds her that she's actually on a classified mission.
Right. But once again, we have, I'm Section 31. Oh, you're Section 31. Oh, everybody knows what Section 31 is. We're back to that
it's just
again.
Like the CIA,
Yes.
Well, so apparently in this time it is. I mean, I think we do have these. I was thinking about this because we have these conflicting bits of data where in the time of Deep Space Nine, nobody has heard of Section 31, but here everybody seems to know about it, like we know about the CIA and the NSA and all those other groups that are listening to us right now.
Right. Hello.
Exactly.
And it makes sense because they established where Section 31's foundation is. It's in the Federation Charter, Article 14, Section 31. There's a provision establishing this organization. And so, Admiral Cornwell even says, nation building is not pretty. That's why this organization exists. Because when you had the Federation being put together and Starfleet being put together, that was nation building. And this was one of the provisions they thought they needed. And it's taken on a life of its own. Well, if it's right there in the Starfleet Charter, then people would know about it.
Well,
I would assume what's happened is that it followed a normal course of development in public consciousness, just like MI5, MI6, CIA, NSA, KGB, all those agencies. But then at some point between the 23rd and the late 24th century, the agency decided we need to take a lower profile.
Right.
And they started disappearing themselves from the record. So by the time of Deep Space Nine, very few people know about it.
And that's...
something key to point out, the Article 14 of the Federation Charter does not specifically create an agency. What it does is it empowers the Federation to take extraordinary measures in times of extreme threat.
I looked it up on Memory Alpha, and I think it says that Section 31 of you're right, Article 14 does do that overall, but Section 31 of the article mentions a specific agency, I think. I could be mistaken.
Okay, I thought I read that differently, but okay, I mean, maybe.
And there may be conflicting versions. Maybe they edited what the charter says as part of their disappearing act.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Enough to give them a legal pretense, but not a specific mention.
That's true.
But by the way, if the CIA or NSA is listening, I will take a free coffee mug or baseball cap.
Yeah. I mean, maybe just folks who like podcasts also work at those places.
J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, I was at a presentation he gave at Comic-Con one year, and he talked about how there were fans of Babylon 5 in the Secret Service at the White House. And they wrote him and they said, we want to send you a T-shirt. And so they did, and he got the T-shirt, and it just said White House on it. And he talked to them and said, it just says White House. And they said, well, what do you think? We're not going to put Secret Service on the T-shirt.
That's a good point.
By the way, I wanted to bring up something, because I'm, even though I'm not as negative on this series, I mean, I'm actually, I enjoy it, but I'm not as negative as some folks out there. But I do try to think from their perspective and, how would they react to various things that we're seeing on screen. One of the things that occurred to me in this episode is we have this idea that Spock is crazy,
Right.
And there's some ambiguity about that. I mean, even Amanda even though everyone's initial reaction is that's can't be true. Even Amanda, was wondering about it. And so we have it on the table that maybe Spock has gone crazy in some way, and they're stretching that out over multiple episodes. And it occurred to me that could be something that people would view negatively, that, oh, we don't like the idea of a crazy Spock. But it occurred to me, actually, no, we've seen that before. Spock has gone crazy in multiple episodes of the original series. The difference is that because the original series was all self-contained, any madness he experienced had to be over by the end of the episode.
Right.
Whereas, except in the two-parter.
Yep.
Whereas now we have episodic storytelling. And so it's the same thing we've seen before. It's just because of the episodic storytelling techniques that are now used in television, it's going on longer. But it still occurred to me that that's a risk that, some people might find it distasteful. But it's actually not different than what we've seen before. It's just the nature of television has changed.
I mean, part of it is
we don't actually know that he has gone insane.
Right.
No, but they're holding out that prospect over multiple episodes.
And part of it is like, if it were just some other character, just some random Vulcan, it might not have this the hold on us, the story of the uncertainty. If it's just random Vulcan has gone crazy and is out there and are trying to track him down, that wouldn't be the same as beloved character Spock that we've known for 50 years has gone crazy. How do we resolve this? Because we know it has to be resolved. And I know that creates a certain kind of dramatic tension, and I appreciate that. I don't have a problem with it, but like you said, I could see where some people might bristle at, we're using Spock in this way.
And to be fair, there are people out there, YouTube commentators and so on, that frankly they were so turned off by how Discovery started and everything behind it that they won't be happy until
it's dead.
All the sets are burned and buried. All copies, digital, physical, whatever, are destroyed. The people involved are taken out back and shot, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That, all memory, that this becomes memoria damnata, no memory. It's, of the series. So
it's impossible for them to give it a fair shake at this point.
And I
some
hope
people.
we haven't given that impression for those who are listening. I think we all very much, we like this series more or less. And I think we've come to like it more now in this second season. We started to like it more in the first season and very much in the second season. Now I think we've started to really enjoy it more.
I don't know that I have. I enjoyed both seasons. I need to rewatch the first one and the second to decide, do I like the second more? I may in the end, but I'm kind of, it's a mix for me. I mean, I'm obviously critical of various things in it, but I also fundamentally, enjoy watching it.
Yeah. I like the first season. I think I enjoy this one a little more. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say that my enjoyment of the series increased. Yeah, I'm critical of it as well. Again, the issue of how do they explain that this captain comes back from the dead all of a sudden, things like that. I'm
critical of every show that I like, though, because none of them are perfect. So we have Giorgio. They brought her on board. She says she's been authorized to hunt down Spock, but by the time she'd found his shuttle, it was empty, which is an interesting idea. Burnham's still acting hostile toward her, and Pike explains to
Burnham needs to grow up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is the Terran Emperor. She is, she has reason to be wary of this woman who was pretty darn evil to begin with when she encountered her. So there is that.
We also get to meet the head of Section 31, this guy named Leland, who Captain Pike knows, apparently.
Right. Or, well, is he the head? Because there's also been mentioned Control.
I think he's her handler. He's not really the head of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's the head of the local.
Right.
He's the local chapters. He's the head of the local chapter.
Yeah. Right. So Pike explains there's a connection between Spock and the signal, and that there are lives at stake. And Leland, who's this guy, the handler, says there are always lives at stake. That's what keeps us employed. We do what we do so you can do what you do. And why does Pike think that's a threat? Pike says, is that a threat? Why is that a threat?
I don't know. I didn't get that either. I suppose it could mean that if we stop doing what we're doing, you're not going to be able to do what you're doing.
Right.
Or in some immediate context, not in a general way. But if I stop doing what I'm doing right now, it's going to thwart your mission.
Right.
Okay.
Or we will, or maybe even going a little bit further of, we can instead act to make your life harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, he doesn't say it explicitly, so it's hard to say that was a threat.
Yeah. I think we can appeal to our all-purpose explanation here. Instead of the time war on this series, it's reshoots.
Reshoots, right. Exactly. Because the story requires it.
By the way, I really liked with Giorgio showing up again.
Yeah.
There's a scene where she and Michael are walking through the corridor, and she says, "I'm learning to really like Starfleet in Section 31." And I like that. And I thought to myself, Michelle Yeoh has really transitioned well as an actor in this series from being a fundamentally good character to being an evil character. She is just, she was nice as the good Captain Giorgio. I enjoyed her. She was this wise figure, She was great. And now she's fun as this, mischievous trickster figure.
Yeah.
She's just a good actor. She's playing it both ways, and she's successful at it.
Folks will have to forgive us for all the constant Doctor Who references. We do this in the Secrets of Doctor Who. We make Star Trek references because we record these on the same day. But I want to
do it anyway.
We would do it anyway. but she reminds me of Missy, character played by Michelle Gomez in recently Doctor Who, that fun trickster bad guy who's on our side, sort of.
Got kind of the twinkle in her eye as she's doing something mischievous.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this character is very interesting, and I'm looking forward to if this Section 31 series has her in it. I'm not certain that it does. That would be a fun series to watch.
Yeah. And that would be a key challenge for the series if she's the main character or something, because especially if it's an ongoing series, because she works as this villainous version of herself as Spice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't make an ongoing diet of spice.
Right.
And so it's nice to put salt and pepper on your food, but eating nothing but salt and pepper is not the way to go. So
right.
That might not be very pleasant.
Yes.
You know, I do have to admit, where there's a scene where Burnham and Emperor are facing off each other, I'm thinking, yeah, Michelle Yeoh could take her really quickly.
yes.
That would be a very short hand-to-hand battle.
I am a longtime fan of Michelle Yeoh's work. There is
in real life, it would be a very short battle.
Yes, in real life.
This is martial artist.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we see at one point in that scene where they're walking down the corridor, we actually see in the background a crewman. I don't know if you saw this, caught this. A crewman in the background in a wheelchair going down the corridor of the Enterprise, the Discovery. And I thought it was interesting because obviously the casting, they don't want to exclude people, and it's kind of nice to have a variety of people. But it made me think, are there no mobile prosthetics in the future? No regrown limbs? And we've seen them talk about regrowing limbs. I just thought that was interesting.
I mean, I would assume it's a nod to what's going to happen eventually to Captain Pike, because he ends up in a wheelchair.
He does.
But so it's consistent with that technology. But you're right. It's also a problem. Why don't they just, give anybody who's paralyzed an exoskeleton controlled from their cerebellum?
Well, right. And there could actually be an explanation too of differences in gravity. I just actually last night happened to watch the Orville episode Home, where the chief security officer there has to go back to her home planet because their home planet has a much higher gravity than Earth's standard.
Yep.
And she had to be in a wheelchair as she adjusted back to her home planet's gravity.
That's true.
And it could be something like that, where this is someone from a lighter gravity than Earth's standard.
In fact, they had that on an episode of Deep Space Nine, where they had a crewman of the episode who we never see again, who was from a low gravity world and used a wheelchair.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. All right. That. I mean, it was nice to see. It was nice to see the they just threw it in there, didn't make a big deal out of it. It's just there, which I thought was good. Giorgio, back to Giorgio and Pike's lack of knowledge. She's surprised that Pike doesn't know about her origin, which is interesting. And Burnham says, I'm under direct orders to keep it secret, which is interesting. Now back to Stamets and Reno trying to save Tilly. As they're trying to figure out what happened to Tilly, they think she's been dissolved by this cocoon thing, and then they start to realize that maybe she's been transported. He quotes Lavoisier, "The universe never let." Yeah, sorry, my French is. I should know how to speak French. But he says the universe never lets anything go to waste, which is the law of conservation of mass. And so they think May took Tilly into the network through a mycelial transporter, which is interesting. So then Tilly, we switch to Tilly in the network, where we find out that May's people are the what are they called again? The
Josep. They introduced that term an episode or so ago.
Okay, Josep. They are insects.
Sounds like a reggae artist.
yeah.
I was going to sound like something from Stargate.
Yeah, it was like Ja Rule, but Josep.
Or Ja Pickney.
They're the insects of the mycelial network. They break down matter to reuse it. That's May's explanation. And so that's going to be key for the rest of this episode. That's the key question.
For some reason, May thinks that Tilly will be able to fight the monster, and I don't know why she thinks Tilly will be able to fight the monster in a way they can't.
Right.
I don't think they explain that enough.
Right. And why Tilly particularly over anyone else? And maybe just that because she bonded with Tilly by infecting her, going into her that time. But anyway, we kind of come back to Discovery, and now Section 31 is sent. Now that we've found out that they're working together, they have a similar looking for Spock. They send a liaison, and the liaison is a bearded Ash Tyler. Yes. So the series has acquired the beard we've mentioned. So it's good, and he's got a head of hair on him now too, which is interesting. Yep. What I find interesting is Burnham is making this distinction, this very clear distinction between Volk and Tyler, and Pike doesn't. Right. And he mentions that, well, he was Tyler when he killed Hugh, which is an important plot point for today's episode.
Well, and speaking of which, I really like the reaction that Stamets has when they bring him on the bridge, because at that moment, Stamets is on the bridge briefing everybody about how we're going to try to save Tilly. And then all of a sudden, Voke, who killed Dr. Culber, walks onto the bridge, and Stamets looks at him, and there's a dramatic moment. It's very brief, but he looks at him, and then he continues with his briefing. And on an emotional level, I mean, he wants to just punch this guy in the face.
Well, he's just absolutely stunned that the guy showed up all of a sudden.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's aghast, but he's professional and he keeps going.
Yep.
And again, I have to kind of keep coming back to this. The Stamets of this season is a very different guy than the Stamets of last season, which we kind of get explained by his experiences, being stuck in the mycelial network, having this thing happen to Hugh.
Being high on mushrooms.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
He has a much different personality, and a more pleasant personality, frankly, than he was before.
But, as we pointed out, an episode or two ago, that it still comes out, where he was talking to Tilly about, I will talk less, that old statement still comes out. Just a little different.
There. Yeah. So the plan is to fly Discovery part way into the network and hold it there, like hold the door open while they go find Tilly. And of course, we have to have a time limit. They will have only an hour until the spores eat through the hull, which in Star Trek terms means exactly 3,600 seconds, no more, no less. And it will be done at 3,599 seconds, and then they'll get out. Which we see this whole thing bear out, the drama, the tension, and the eating of the hull. And I'm like, at the end, okay,
it looks like there's a little discoloration remaining on their hull.
Right, and by the end of the episode, the hull looks perfectly fine as they're flying off. And it's like, you'd have to go back to the shipyard to replace the hull, right?
But you know what? That we've seen that in Star Trek. How long? How many times did Voyager get the stuffing knocked out of it? In the next episode, it looks like it just flew out of the car wash.
Right. Every sci-fi series does this. I mean, it's not just Star Trek, but
except Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
To be fair,
that's true.
I assume that when they're talking about hull failure, so it's not like the insects have to eat all the way through the hull.
Right.
They just have to eat enough of the hull that it loses integrity at speed, or you have explosive decompression happen.
Okay.
And so I assume they actually don't need to eat that much of it to cause a catastrophic failure. And that could be consistent with the damage we see at the end, that they just didn't get to the level. But if they'd gotten a little further, it wouldn't have been safe to fly this thing.
Right.
But that's fan rationalization.
That's right.
What I had more trouble with is, so they have this dangerous plan. They establish it's very dangerous. And it's like Starfleet is a promise and we never leave anyone behind and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, dude, the needs of the many can outweigh the needs of the one. Okay.
Right.
And I don't mind you having a dangerous plan for purposes of the story and doing it anyway, but somebody here should be saying, is this really the thing we should do?
Right.
Because it's, do you really want to risk all these people and these billions of credits of hardware, military resources, and that's a unique ship we don't have another one of,
right?
To go after this one person in this way? Maybe we should stop and think of something else.
Right. Yeah. Right. There should be someone on board. You're saying, and usually it's Spock or on Voyager, the Vulcan. Tuvok,
Yeah.
or somebody logical like that and not emotional.
Right. And there should be someone who, I mean, like in canon law, a defender of the bond, or devil's advocate, there should be a promoter of justice. There should be someone whose job it is.
Right.
To say, wait a minute, this is dangerous,
Well, and the perfect time to do that would have been the person who's the kind of the transhumanist, where they've got I can never think of her name, but the
starts
one
with an A.
Yeah, the one that said, so we want to do a partial journey where we have the origin but not the destination, or paraphrasing off the top of my head, but idea of why did they say, well, isn't that putting the ship gravely at risk?
Yes, right. In fact, maybe that should supposed to be Burnham's job as science officer, and the logical
Saru as first
Saru.
officer.
Right, and that they're not doing that because of their emotional attachment. Could be.
Well, and maybe that's showing the difference in Saru's character now that they got rid of the
fear,
ganglia. Now he doesn't have that fear that he's going to immediately say, "Oh, this is dangerous. We shouldn't do it."
That's true, because that could have gotten old real quick with him as a character constantly doing that. So Tilly and May, or the mycelial May, they board Discovery once they see it poke through into
Pinky
the network.
Swears. I never imagined we'd see Pinky swears on Star Trek, but we do.
If anyone was gonna do it, it would be Tilly. And they find evidence that the monster that they're afraid of is on board, and they track it down. And it is Hugh. And it's real Hugh. He's not a mycelial hallucination. It is really that guy, and he's essentially become a madman. He's gone crazy,
right?
Which makes sense. He's been there for months, right?
By the way, there's another plot hole here, which is that they established that the Josep attack to eat anything made of normal matter. And that's why they're attacking Discovery. And they also attack Tilly, consequently. But May tells them nix on Tilly sushi, or whatever you imagine them as eating. And now that they've established that May can tell them to back off, they then do the logical thing. And Tilly says, well, tell them to back off eating the Discovery. And because now they've created the ability dramatically for her to do that. And so they hang a lantern on that. And May says, I'm not going to tell them anything of the kind. And that explains why they're still going forward. But this is a big plot hole now, because Tilly could have said, if you want my help with the monster, you're going to have to tell them to stop eating my ship.
Right. I'm not going to help you, go on board. If we go on board this thing while they're still eating it, we could get killed in the process. Yeah. Right. Never mind the damage that could be done to the mycelial network if it explodes halfway in. And then now we find out why Hugh is also considered a monster, is because in order to protect himself from the spores, the Josep, he's covered himself in this tree bark, mycelial tree bark, that's poisonous to them, which they take as an aggressive action. And I don't understand why that is. I mean, they're aliens, so that's perfectly reasonable that they would have a different point of view, but it just seems weird that they see his defense against them by covering himself, that's not taking overt actions against them, is seen as aggression and destroying the mycelial network. I thought that's what
I guess the only thing I could think of is, that the mycelial network has a very simple look on life. Their job is to break down matter. They exist for that purpose only. And of course, by defending himself against that, they see that as an attack against them doing their purpose. I mean, that's the only way I can really kind of rationalize it.
I would assume it's kind of like how feuds get started. They initially go to eat him. He figures out a way to defend himself. He kills some of them. They take it personally. They don't realize he's just defending himself, so he must be a monster, and it just kind of Hatfields and McCoys from there.
That's true.
Yep.
I mean, it's effective because, as we said at the beginning, this idea of each one misunderstands the other's motives, and it creates the problem that doesn't need to be there if they only cooperated. So meanwhile, as Discovery keeps slipping further into through the door of the mycelial network.
Which is bad, because if you cross one of the zones where the network is intruding on the Discovery, you're going to get discombobulated.
Right.
You're going to turn into those
so you
twisted
have, like,
up puddles you saw on the Glen.
Yeah, so like the zone invades the bridge, and everyone has to rigorously stay away from it. At which point, Ash Tyler slaps his chest and talks to the cloaked Section 31 starship and uses a comm badge.
Right.
For the first time in this time period. And Pike is like, what kind of communicator is that?
Exactly. One thing I do like, though, is the image that this barrier wasn't just like a static line across the ship, but it looked more like an ocean waves crashing against a sinking ship.
Right, like the ship was filling with water almost. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a very effective visual of what was going on.
So, and I like that the Section 31 ship was disguised as a nearby asteroid and then decloaks and is there to help them, which was funny. And then
it fires things to use to attach its tractor beams, and they're later called tractor rigs. And I'm like, wait, we've never seen tractor rigs before,
right.
And just 5-10 years from now, they're using tractor beams with no tractor rigs. So why do they need these things?
Well, I wonder if, that's the development of technology, because in Enterprise, they don't have tractor beams. They have a harpoon or grappling hooks.
Yep.
And maybe they see this as sort of an
interim step,
interim technology. Maybe
and it could be a way to boost the tractor beams too,
right?
Make them more effective.
Could be Section 31 tech.
One thing I kind of liked is the Section 31 ship kind of sort of looked like the old original series Romulan ships.
Yes, a little bit.
Kind of very similar design, with kind of the rounded center part and then the two nacelles.
And that's likely similar because they're using similar cloaking technology to what the Romulans had in the series Enterprise.
Right.
Exactly.
And not quite as flat as that, but yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So we get the reunion between Stamets and Culber, and it's to convince him that he's real. And then
so he mentions going to a museum to seeing de Kooning paintings, and that's a reference to the 20th century, because everything is from the 20th century.
Of course.
Abstract Dutch painter Willem de Kooning.
Yes.
However, my problem with the scene is, look, he thinks you're a hallucination. Telling him memories of things you both know is not going to convince him you're not a hallucination.
Especially a doctor.
Yeah. If I'm having a hallucination, I assume my hallucination knows everything I know.
Right. That's true. So and then we have this extended, so we've got, minutes to live. Everything is coming apart. Everything is being destroyed.
These are the longest minutes ever. Your time is up. You got to do something now. Okay, let's take 5 more minutes and not mention
exactly.
it.
Well, and then it's spending all this time explaining how Hugh could be alive. Hey, I get an idea. Let's get back to the other side first, and then explain how he could have survived. Yeah. Like this, get out of the network first, and then explain. But no, it's like, ugh.
What I did like in this sequence is where Tilly turns to May and explains to him, "You're the monster." Right. To Dr. Culber, "You're the monster." And this is so nice because it's an inversion of a standard Star Trek trope and a standard sci-fi trope, but especially Star Trek, where it's like, oh, that silicon creature that's been killing everybody is actually not a monster after all. And you have the humans being enlightened about something is not a monster. It's nice for once to have the aliens being enlightened that something is not a monster.
Right. Exactly. And meanwhile, so like Leland is determined to just end this all and pull the Discovery out, and to the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few, as we mentioned. And Giorgio blackmails him to get 3 more minutes.
Oh yes,
yeah. He would they, because he as she's issuing instructions, he threatens her with a court-martial, and he says, she says, would they court-martial you if they knew what you did 6 years ago on Denova to the wrong ambassador? And he says, well, that was a minor thing, and it would be hard to prove. if someone accessed the data behind your firewall, would it be easy to prove? You may wish to consider that.
Yeah. So he gives her 3 minutes, and that's when we discover that Hugh cannot exist outside the network. We get this whole thing about his energies from our universe, but his matter is from theirs, and that we talked about that already. So
and this is where it becomes nonsensical.
yes, and so Burnham comes up with the idea to use the cocoon as the source of our of matter for him from our whatever. And so meanwhile, May doesn't want to lose this connection that she has to Tilly, and then Tilly convinces her that, quote, the universe, end quote, will bring them back together again somehow. And
What, like gravity?
Exactly. Well, and this is again another way that that a lot of these shows do this is we don't want to talk about God. We don't want to think about like that there's a personal deity out there. But we want to assign all the matter and energy that surrounds us some sort of will that it wants to bring us together of some sort, that has some desires or interests. It's some sort of sentience. But
all I could think of is a Captain Tennille song, "Love Will Keep Us Together."
Yeah, I kept thinking of that too.
But it drives me crazy in a lot of these shows, this idea that like somehow the universe is doing a thing. The universe. Well, no, it's not the universe that does it. The universe doesn't care. The universe is a bunch of, matter.
Stuff.
It's stuff. Yeah. So anyway,
I just wanted to add one more note on the nonsense in how they bring Dr. Culber back.
Yep.
Because Burnham at some point has this blinding realization that the one thing that's missing here is Hugh's DNA, and that's why they can't reconstitute him.
Right.
Well, they haven't fully eaten him. I mean, he's there. Even if he's been translated into some other form of matter, you could just get his DNA from that.
Right.
DNA is just, you just need the information. Yeah.
Well, that's what they ultimately do. It's because the difference is where the matter came from. The matter matters. And,
right,
yeah.
So the mycelial network, Dr. Culber, can't be in our universe because the matter isn't from our universe, but the pod was made from matter from our universe, thanks to Tilly.
Yeah,
right. And that's why but the DNA came from the mycelial network, Dr. Culber.
Yeah, but they had that there. I mean, they could have reconstituted him already.
DNA is just a pattern. It's a pattern of matter, right?
Yeah.
So just look at the pattern and replicate it using,
and that is ultimately what they did, even if they didn't explain it very well.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, what they did now, when we see Dr. Culber in the mycelial network, time has passed for him. His hair is grown, his beard is grown. He's got scars on his body from the attacks he suffered. So clearly, time has passed for him. When he pops out of the cocoon, shave and a haircut, 2 bits, no scars, no nothing. I'm sorry, he should look the same. If all you did was change his matter over to normal matter, he should still have the long hair and the beard. Maybe you give him a shave and a haircut if you want in sickbay, but so you could change that the very next scene and it would be fine. We could infer that's what happened. But having a barber function built into your alien transporter cocoon?
Oh, why not? Wouldn't that be great?
Like who decided that he needed a haircut at that point?
Yeah.
The aliens? You're right. Yes, that is a bit of a hole in the plot there.
Wouldn't that be great though? If we had transporters like that, you travel someplace and by the way, your hair gets cut to the exact length you want, your beard gets nicely trimmed, and
the serial murder machine could trim my hair while I travel through it. At least the next to me will have shorter hair.
Yeah.
my thing about the transporter. So now one consequence of Hugh now being alive on this side is it's going to be really awkward when he sees Tyler for the first time. That should make for some interesting moments. So we can look forward to that.
Well, he always was more compassionate than Stamets, so I suspect he'll be able to deal with it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
he's also
Tyler
a doctor.
Will do.
He also, being a doctor, he's going to be able to say eventually. I mean, if they play it right, the smart way to do it would be for him to quickly get to the realization this guy was under brainwashing and reacted on instinct in an emergency situation, and I'm back, and that's what matters.
Right, and frankly, I would rather he not just be back on duty in the next episode, but that he's going to have to go through.
recovering.
I like the current doctor better, actually. She's feisty.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, she is.
Speaking of a cross, and
Yep.
did I miss? But to cross another shows, did I miss Stephen Moffat on the credits? Because this feels like Stephen Moffat's. He can't let people die.
No, nobody ever really
Yeah.
dies. Yeah. Well, yeah, because Giorgio's not dead. I mean, she's back in a way. Now Hugh is back in a way. Is there anybody else who's dead that we should see come back?
Lorca.
Lorca.
Lorca, and there's been rumors of that.
There's been
At least
rumors.
not this season, but maybe the third season.
Well, I mean, it's like with Giorgio, it's a different Lorca. So maybe our universe has a Lorca somewhere, right? Lurking in the corners. Get it? Meanwhile, speaking of people coming back, Admiral Cornwall is back. And she tells Leland and Pike that to cut out their BS, manlier than thou baloney, and
Team up already.
team up, and that she says the signals leave behind tachyon radiation, which could be a sign of time travel, transporters, cloaks, or anything really. So that's really unimportant information then. But it means that they have to work together to figure out what's going on, and then they have to work together. Tyler's permanent on the Discovery.
Right. So, and Leland says, unless you want Giorgio, and immediately all three of them are like, no.
Nope. Everybody knows that would be a bad idea. And then we're back to Giorgio, who says she says something interesting to Burnham. She says, I've had your life in my hands a dozen times, and you're gonna have to start trusting me at some point because I have your best interest at heart. And then Burnham replies, said the scorpion to the frog, which is a nice little literary reference. And then we kind of close out there for the episode with coming next week, and we don't have to get into that because we'll talk about it next week. But
Giorgio does say, though, that her goal is to save Spock from people who are hunting him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because most people are under the impression this guy has gone psychopathic and become a mass murderer.
Right. And we don't believe Giorgio. We just don't believe that she has an altruistic heart.
I do.
But,
I don't think she has an altruistic heart, but I think she is, for whatever reason, seriously trying to get Spock and not have him just be killed by the first people who run across him and decide to use phasers.
Right. And by the way, at this point is we get our first really hint at the Red Angels are maybe more than some sort of spiritual being, that maybe they're time travelers or of some sort.
Right.
And so a more natural explanation for what they are. So that's maybe what's coming down the, I was going to say down the pike, but you know what I mean. So do you have any the last bits of commentary on this episode before we wrap up?
I'm good.
I've got just a couple things. Pike says when Burnham first sees Ash Tyler, Pike says, "I prefer people whose truth I can take at face value." That sounds like the definition of being honest if you're a subjectivist. At least you're honest about your truth. Whether or not I agree with it's another story, but at least you're honest about your truth.
Right.
And then Leland, mentioned that, in his line of work, he crosses lines, and he crossed a line with Pike somewhere. I wonder if they'll ever pay that off, or that's just kind of a throwaway statement that Leland apparently did something in the past to kind of sour their friendship.
Yeah, or if it's just to make Leland a sinister figure. Yeah, that's a question.
Exactly.
Okay, so all right, so as we do, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek. And today we're thanking by name Father Eric, Kathy L., Linda N., Janet M., and Sam E. It's through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give that it makes it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows we do at sqpn.com. And if you'd like, you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of the Saints of Imperfection and what we had to say about it? Did you find any other bits of the show that you wanted to mention to us that you found interesting? You can let us know by visiting sqpn.com/trek or the SQPN Facebook page, and leave us some feedback there, or send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. You can find links relevant to our discussion on our show notes on sqpn.com, and we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode, The Sounds of Thunder. Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom, and live long and prosper.
And Father Corey, thank you as well.
And thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, are you ready to execute this very bold, deeply insane plan of yours?